Hello, hello, guys. Welcome to another edition of the Wandering Wanderers. And uh, बहुत बहुत स्वागत है आप लोगों का। एक हफ्ता हो गया। A lot has happened. This 2026 keeps on giving every time, but we are chugging along. We have three great stories today, and can't wait to get into it. Abhijit, how are you doing today?
Hi everyone, nice to see everyone here again. Welcome to the second episode of sweet second episode of Wasted Wanderers. Um, yeah, it's been a week, and as we promised in the first episode of this one, and actually we have been promising this since 2026 started, right? It's gonna be a fun year, like whether you like anyone or not, it's just like 2026 is just a cow that keeps giving, right? Like ये ऐसी गाय है जो दूध देती ही रहती है, या वो ये ऐसी मुर्गी है, like you know आपको सोने का अंडा हर हफ्ते मिलता रहता है. So these days we are literally never short of content, and we are always having to look at like 10-20 things and then decide कि okay, three topics, what do we actually decide to talk about, right? तो आप तो हमें you guys see us for like 40 minutes, we talk, we give our opinions, we analyze, do whatever we can, but behind the scenes it takes like 3 hours to actually get ready for one of these sessions, and that's because there's just so much happening. It's some of it is Most of it is quite exciting, some of it is also disheartening, but here on Wasted Wanderers we'll try to keep it to the fun stuff. We don't want to make it overly serious, um, but obviously we also want to talk about topics that will end up touching everyone's lives, especially here in North America. So, all right, yeah, let's get started. So let me do this. Let me pull up what we have for the day. I'm actually not sure कि कौन से पे जाएगा. Okay, perfect. So yeah, this is our first topic for the day, and yeah, JD, you start with this one. You're closer to this.
Sure. Yeah, yeah. So this was a interesting blog post I came across. So what this is, everybody knows, the AI revolution that's happening. Now, one company is benefiting the most from it, which is Nvidia. We've talked about Nvidia a lot in the past. Now, all the advanced manufacturing chips in the world. This includes the Nvidia chips. This includes the chips in your iPhone. This includes chips on your other phones or other laptops or computers. All this mostly is made by one company, which is TSMC. So historically, TSMC, most of the, what do you say, like, the biggest customer for TSMC was Apple, right? Apple produced a lot of chips, a lot of iPhones, and it was a high profit margin customer. But lately, because of this AI revolution, what has happened is that Nvidia is becoming a bigger customer than Apple, and TSMC, which produces these chips physically, has limited capacity, right? So it needs to assign capacity to each company, and yeah, Nvidia and Apple are indirectly fighting for these capacities. So it's interesting, like, Abhijit. Yeah, before I go into like more detail, like, what do you think, like, of this Nvidia versus Apple, which is very unique, right? Not reported, I think, anywhere. Hey Abhijit, I think we have some kind of a technical issue. Like, I'm not able to hear you.
Oh, sorry guys, I was on mute.
Yep,
Um,
yep. Go
so
ahead.
I've always held one view when it comes to Mac 7. There are three real companies: Microsoft, Apple, and Google. Without these three, you simply cannot imagine today's world, right? Now, Google makes its own chips, so they don't necessarily rely on Nvidia to give them GPUs. They have their own TPUs. They use a combination of GPUs, TPUs, whatever they want to call it, CPUs, and then, you know, if they wanted, I'm pretty sure they could literally just downsize their TPUs to function more like GPUs and then downsize them further to make them function more like CPUs. Apple has its own chip designs, right? Nvidia is the chip maker who is supplying to everyone else who doesn't have the money and the budget to make their own. Essentially, they buy off the shelf product and they do what they need to do. They train their models, they supply them to everyone else, um, and I, I think eventually Apple will. I don't know if there'll be a clear winner in this war, especially because I think the clear winner is going to be just TSMC. They get to decide. They'll probably give their production capacity to the highest bidder. I would, if I was sitting in TSMC's shoes, I will have to take a look at which of my customers has an unbreakable moat so that they can keep giving me orders for the longer term. At this point, both the companies have a very, very strong foothold in what they do. The problem is, Apple is basically not in the AI race. I don't know if they're doing anything credible. Um, maybe I should read their annual report or something. Nvidia is literally Nvidia is literally existing as it is because of AI. Now they are purely an AI supplying company. They're the GPUs for gaming. I think that's more of a sideshow. So it's a tough call for TSMC. I don't know which one they should go with, but yeah, I've always held that okay, without Apple, Microsoft, and Google, there is literally no technology. As far as this fight is concerned, I think eventually they'll all get to one table and then they'll just discuss over some tea and biscuits and just decide on who gets what. Or ultimately, TSMC will have to take a decision on who the highest bidder is, because typically that makes the most immediate business common sense. And the fact of the matter is, TSMC itself is going to start facing headwinds soon. They won't be the only chip manufacturer in the world. They have a dominance right now, but I think US is trying to build its own fab shops in Arizona. I don't know if that is going to be for TSMC or I don't know in what capacity. We know that India has come out with a 30 or 23 nanometer chip. Yeah, it's not 3 nanometers, but you need your 3 nanometer technology for very selected technology. Most of them can work with larger with larger sizes of these transistors. So I think TSMC should just stick with. I would personally, I would personally value loyalty over money, just because I know TSMC is already maybe doing their own market analysis, but they are about to start facing headwinds. Like, not many people will require the most cutting edge fabs of TSMC to build their 3 nanometer chips. That's what I would say. There will be other people who will be manufacturing chips in the future.
Yeah,
Near
yeah.
future, not even long term.
Yep, yeah. No, that's a good insight. If you scroll down, there's a graph showing like uh what the yeah, this one, what the phone versus AI chips breakdown was for TSMC. So you can see the pink one is the phone, and the purple one is the high performance computing, which is AI. So you
Yeah.
can see in 2023, it was 38%, then 2024, 35, now it's 29. So the smartphone capacity is shrinking, and this HPC is increasing, which is mostly Nvidia, but also I think Apple's laptop and desktop chips, they also
Correct.
are in this. So, anyways, like going back to my point, like why is this happening? So Nvidia, everybody knows, is worth 4 trillion, 5 trillion, I don't even know at this point, company, right? And people always say, like, is it worth that much? Well, you have to look at it this way, like, how big is the AI market? Like X trillion dollars, and that market was kind of created by Nvidia, right? So that's why Nvidia's market size is the AI market size, at least, right? So um, that's Nvidia. But like TSMC is also an interesting company because it's a pure fab company, right? It doesn't hold IP. Like Nvidia owns IP on its chips. Apple probably has patents and IPs on its chips. TSMC is a pure fab business, so hardware business. So um, it's a very expensive business. So if you scroll down more, um, I think uh, yeah, it's the last graph. So keep scrolling. There's a graph called TSMC keep spending. Um, yeah, this one. So you can see like almost in 2026, almost 40% of TSMC's revenue goes into R&D to build the actual chips. Like it's like around what, like $52 billion. That's insane, right? Like that's way higher than Nvidia, way higher than Apple. So it's in their interest to secure these long-term commitments, and Apple has been a good trusted uh, partner. I mean, Apple actually started TSMC's rise to where it is now. It's a very reliable partner. Whereas Nvidia, historically, we saw like a boom with crypto and then a bust. So with AI, maybe it might be that, maybe it might not be that, we don't know. But still, I would say like TSMC has to be careful here to hedge his bets and not go all in on Nvidia, because it's like the new hot girl in the town right now, but Apple has been reliable in the past. Yeah.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, once there are many options to get these chips manufactured, see, at the end of the day, TSMC stands for Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company, right? So at the end of the day, US doesn't want Taiwan, such a big dependency on Taiwan, right? So ultimately, you'll see a lot of fab shops show up in the states. Maybe they'll still be under the TSMC label, but they'll all be just be sort of they'll try to come up with a way to either make them in the US, which I think it'll be more very expensive, no doubt. I don't think there's a magical answer to reducing production costs in the US overnight. I don't think that can be possible. But the other thing that companies and countries do in such a case is they start trying to diversify with giving orders to multiple suppliers offshore, right? So TSMC for now will have to, yeah, they can use Nvidia as hedging bets, as a hedge because of what's happening. Okay, no, no, because of what's happening with you know the market for Nvidia. It keeps going. It's very volatile, but Apple's market is more stable. But the truth of the matter is, Apple's market will just not increase as fast as what you would expect Nvidia's to increase. Maybe not. We'll see where how AI is going to either continue growing exponentially or start plateauing. But yeah, the TSMC will just have to come up with a very reasonable expected value figure for their revenue, and then they'll have to weigh their options between Nvidia and Apple to see, do they want to prioritize stability, or do they want more revenue today and then maybe be ready for some volatility in the future. Because if you start forcing your other Apple like customers of your production capacity, they'll start finding alternatives, and when they do, you'll fall behind. When you suddenly need them again, they won't suddenly come and say, "Oh, I'm just going to switch my order back to you." So we'll see where this goes. I'm hoping that there is some middle ground where both can be satisfied, and then from a TSMC perspective, that becomes the ultimate win-win for them. Okay, guys, let's go to the next one for today. Again, we'll go back to software, and this kind of goes back to what we were just discussing, right? Because AI has been such a disruptor that we are seeing a lot of the classical software companies struggling because software itself is going out of fashion. So here they have a graph of, I guess, three companies: Adobe, Salesforce, and ServiceNow, that are basically seeing very poor stock performance over the years, right? And the argument that this article is making is, because you have things like vibe coding, you have AI that can generate code very quickly. No one needs custom, or no one needs off the shelf software which is specialized in one area. People can just do a lot of the things that they used to need software for before with AI. To a large extent, that's true. Like, imagine if we were trying to start this YouTube channel, maybe even 3 years ago, let's say, about 2022, then for every thumbnail, we would need a software we would need something from Adobe Suite to be able to put together a nice looking thumbnail, maybe have some Photoshop skills, InDesign skills, understand what an SVG is, how do you work with them. It would just take a lot longer. We would be using targeted software to make the thumbnail. Then if we wanted to edit the video, then we'll need, either you could use an Adobe Premiere or DaVinci Resolve and everything. But what's happened is, in this example, you have the live format where we don't necessarily have to edit. We just have to have our thoughts together. And then we can use a software like what we are right now to be able to present our content, have our heads, and it just looks pretty polished out of the box. So one is, I don't need that. The second thing is, with generating thumbnails, catchy descriptions, titles, we can use AI as a starting point. And then we can go ahead, refine it, make it look what we exactly want it to look like, and then be ready to go live, right? So to some extent, and then again, same thing for the thumbnail, right? We can ask one of these LLMs to produce an image, use our headshots in certain frames and contexts, and then sort of, if we don't like it, we'll prompt it again, we'll ask it to move things around a bit, and then I've never been in a situation where I didn't like the first or the second output. Like, I'm fine. If you give it a good enough description, it'll give you a good enough image. So my need for something like Adobe primarily goes away, especially since Adobe is a subscription service, right? I think more than it's not just AI and it's not just vibe coding that's leading to these software companies suffering. Overall, I feel, and there might be stuff out there on this, but I also think there is subscription fatigue, right? Adobe is a subscription product, Salesforce is a subscription product, ServiceNow is a subscription. All of them try to capitalize on a subscription model, try to get the user, okay, pay every month. Everyone just gets sick of it. Now you go on YouTube. There is literally tons and tons of YouTubers literally teaching you how to make your own NAS so that you don't have to pay cloud storage, right? So I also think there's genuinely just subscription fatigue, which is leading organizations and individuals to go off these platforms. Like, I may have to look at the Salesforce and ServiceNow story a little deeper because they are more B2B products. Like, personally, I don't have any use for Salesforce, like, as one person running a damn YouTube channel. But same thing with ServiceNow, right? A low code, no code product that everyone uses to, make custom looking applications and whatnot. So I'm not sure why ServiceNows would decrease, but again, in that space, there are so many offerings in the low code, no code world that ServiceNow is just one of the options. And more and more, it's getting difficult for these companies to even differentiate themselves. I think AI just gets the flack because it's the newest buzzword in town. Part of it can be because of AI. I just don't think vibe coding is leading to these companies losing market share because vibe coding is crap. Like, vibe coding generates rubbish at the next level. And the minute you want to do anything else with the software code it generated, I mean, JD is a software engineer. Will you vibe code your next assignment from your employer, JD? Like, go ahead, talk, rant.
Uh, no, because like I feel like right now where AI is, I think one of my teammates put it best, is like a junior engineer who's drunk and keeps forgetting things. That's where AI vibe coding is right now. So yeah, you can build like your um personal project or like start something if you want to go from like 0 to 1 or even point 0.5. It's a good thing to start, but I mean, if you want to create something good, if you want to create something scalable, then you need to hire like a proper software engineer. So I mean, to get back to your point though, what's happening to all these B2B SaaS companies, right? Salesforce, ServiceNow, um, I would even say Infosys, Wipro, right? Um, the Even though yes, you can't vibe code the what these companies are doing, the cost of making software is kind of bottoming out. Like it's now commoditized. Now, instead of hiring like a big Salesforce or ServiceNow kind of team, you can hire a smaller team of some startup, or even internally you can do it. You can run AI to understand the code and then create like some kind of scaffolding and do things like that. So it's just easier for country companies to do this themselves instead of hiring these outside subscription based uh, products, right? And you also know, Abhijit, right? Like these companies, their main source of income is not the actual contract, but it's like the renewal of the contract and the maintenance and all those kind of add-ons, right? So I feel like um, all these companies, even Adobe, they will have to like think of some long term strategy, because if you're a software company and you're thinking, oh, making software for other companies using subscription used to work maybe 5 years 2 years ago, that is not going to work now. Like it's just the cost of creating software is so cheap now. I mean, even for, as you said, right, like it took us half an hour to get ready for this live stream with all the different things we have to do, like thumbnail and writing text. But because of AI, like it is faster. Like I don't have to contract out to some uh, f- like photo editor or even like a graphic designer or like a speech writer or something. we can just do it ourselves. So like that cost has gone down. So yeah, like I think these companies have to fundamentally rethink their existence, I would say.
Actually, the other thing with such big vendors like the ones that are listed here, you're right, they thrive on the subscription, but they also they'll underbid like hell when they want to bid a contract, and then they will keep trying to make money off of what they call customizations, right? Like they will just for like they will always quote you something where they can implement something out of the box. No company in the world will exactly fit out of the box. And as soon as the client wants to deviate from out of the box, quote unquote, they'll call it a customization. Once they call it a customization, there's a change request, there's a change order, and then they make money, right? It is almost guaranteed that every implementation project of any of these big platforms will get delayed. There is no way around it, even at the smallest of the clients. And every day that it gets delayed, it's more money for the client. So now, if the client itself has a decent IT team, they can request if all they are looking for is, they have an existing solution, they just want something added, they can literally ask one of their IT people to start coding something custom using AI, and it'll work for them, right? So I think that's one, and then they don't have to worry about subscription fees. My only thing with the analysis in this article is, don't just dump everything on AI, because AI will help you make something basic, it'll work, but in the long run you will have to know your code base, especially if it's a custom app. You'll have to know your code base to extend it in any meaningful way. Otherwise, if you just keep relying on AI to fix all your problems, add your new features, clean up your Jira board in that sense, it's not going to work. You will run into a lot of you'll run into a lot of dead ends, and you'll realize that, okay, the amount of analysis I need to be able to fix this bug, might as well rewrite. I also think the bigger reason, or maybe one of the equally weighted reasons, that Adobe, Salesforce, ServiceNow, and all these other types of platforms, they are losing, or their stocks are performing poorly, is one, from an investment perspective, they may just not even have the room to grow. Too many players. Like there's literally, if you were using Ubuntu Linux, you will have a whole suite of open source software which could complement Adobe offering by offering. Will it be as swanky as Adobe? No. But it'll get the job done for that, 80% of the people. And if you go by the Pareto principle, you know, 80-20 rule, 80% of the problems will be solved by that open source software. Salesforce, harder to mimic because CRM. ServiceNow, again, if you just have a Microsoft subscription and you just link it to your enterprise, you link it to a company, you can get Power Apps. So then again, I don't know why you would exactly only want to use ServiceNow or Appian or UiPath, OutSystems. There's like a dime a dozen of these platforms, right? So I think it's not. I think it's a little. I haven't read the whole thing, but I don't think it's only because of AI that these companies' stocks are performing poorly, or these companies are performing poorly. I think it's just also subscription fatigue, and everyone's like waking up to saying that, okay, my subscription bill is just so high that I really need to not use some of this stuff. I really don't need it. All these software are getting hyper optimized. They're giving too many features. No one cares about them. I mean, and I think the best way to demonstrate this is, okay, you want to make a PowerPoint presentation. Just next time anyone wants to make a PowerPoint deck, look at how many features you actually use versus how many different things PowerPoint can actually do. Like there is so much feature bloat on even the most basic software that why do you need something else just sitting on your machine or sitting in the cloud these days just to be able to get something else done. Like if you're a company of 30 people and you're trying to generate leads to try and sell your product, you are a series B startup, or maybe you just became, profit positive. Do you really need Salesforce to track your leads? Like, no, it's Salesforce will be needed when you are at that scale which warrants something like Salesforce. And this is I did a related live on this on the Narad News channel, where I was talking about how Silicon Valley is the most premium of startup ecosystems. And a
Mm-hmm.
startup that's going to start like tomorrow, or it just started maybe a year ago, they don't necessarily need Silicon Valley. They can first capture their local markets, get money locally, and then move up to Silicon Valley. And that's why we are seeing the CVC market, looking into secondaries and etc. to try and generate more liquidity. But again, that's similar to why maybe these companies are also losing share, because a lot of the medium sized players are realizing we don't necessarily need something like this to get an edge in the market. There is no replacement. If you want to make a sale, there's no replacement to actually going to someone, talking to them, and then getting trying to make a sale. Or there is no or AI is a good enough replacement for your YouTube thumbnail. Or if I am already paying for a Microsoft subscription as a 50 people company, I can just add a little more onto that and then use Power Apps, and I don't necessarily need ServiceNow. I think I think there are just too many alternatives, and then the premiumness of some of these products is what's actually pricing them out from the majority of the market. Yeah.
Awesome.
Okay, guys,
All right.
let's get to the final one for the day. And this has got nothing to do with tech. It maybe has something to do with tech, but this is also more politics than just hardcore West Coast, right? So,
Yeah, let's go for it.
yeah, Europe's $1 trillion race to build back its defense industry. Facing Russian aggression and a split with the US, Europe is churning out the weapons it needs to arm itself independently. It has a way to go. I don't deny that. It does have a way to go. Um, for everyone who may not be following this beat week after week, what's kind of happened is since the World Economic Forum happened at Davos, um, yeah, EU has basically put a hold on its uh, trade deal with the US, and then on the other side, the EU is quote unquote trying to sign a deal with India, and then Ursula von der Leyen, who is the head of the EU Commission. Anyway, I get this EU stuff gets very confusing, but she has basically said that there is a mother of all deals, quote unquote, going to be signed with India, which is going to increase trade up to 850 billion euros over the next 5 years. Now, this was just a trade deal. Now, what has happened is something has come around talking about a defense pact as well. And that's what's leading to, I think, all the news that's coming out on this side of the pond regarding the 1 trillion race, right? Because this 1 trillion race, I mean, this is just my conjecture. You convert 850 billion euros to US dollars, it's about a trillion. So let's go down this one quickly. Of course, we all know President Trump and the administration want to acquire Greenland. Looks like for now they've sort of walked back that, and they're saying, okay, we will reach an agreement with the EU to see if we can, maybe just put a few bases and whatnot in Greenland and then kind of be done with it. Um, Again, I did a live on what are Canada's options vis-a-vis if US were to take Greenland, and in that I highlighted a survey from a Danish institution that has basically done, and we are saying 85% of Greenlanders are saying not to become a part of the US. Again, and that I mean, I was pretty clear that, okay, if the US does decide they want it, they'll be able to get it. But the issue is it will come at the cost of NATO itself. So the NATO alliance will lose all its meaning. It'll just be broken if US were to go and take Greenland. Bottom line is, this has all the blah 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 that has happened over the past 2-3 weeks vis-a-vis US's aspirations towards Greenland has basically almost forced Europe to start looking for new alternatives and to start, because if from their perspective there is a lack of trust in the relationship with the states, then they will need to fend for its own defense. I would argue that this is actually the the course of events is exactly what the US put out in its national security strategy, right? They mentioned clearly that they would want Europe to start footing their bill for their defense through maybe through a plan or maybe unplanned, but now that's what Europe is actually trying to do. So it's in that sense, with the US's current positioning, with the Don Roe doctrine, for the lack of a better word, it's actually a win-win for both the sides, right? US is getting what it needs in terms of not having to spend as much from its defense umbrella perspective, and Europe is now starting to look at becoming more independent when it comes to its own defense. If I were to use the NSS document as a starting point, I would say it's working out exactly as it was outlined in that, right? The challenge for the US is the way it has worked out is okay. Now EU will be forced to look at other ways to procure defense equipment, which means that it will directly hurt US's military industrial complex, right? If EU decides to diversify its defense purchases, either one by building on its own because it has a lot of technology, buying the smaller grade equipment from countries with lower manufacturing costs, namely India and maybe some other in South Asia where the democratic values can align a bit, then US essentially loses its market because Europe is almost at par in producing the high, the cutting edge of technology equipment, right? They have their fighters, they have their submarine technology, all the good stuff is there. Maybe in terms of missiles, they are behind, but again, for missiles, there are many other alternatives. India has BrahMos and uh, Russia has its own stuff. I don't think Europe will be buying anything from Russia anytime soon when it comes to defense equipment, because that's
No,
what they're
like,
primarily trying to defend themselves from.
yep.
But there are options, is what I'm saying, and we are kind of this will be it. This can't happen overnight. I think a lot of news comes out that oh my god, something's gonna happen tomorrow. Just because you sign a trade deal with someone at the government level, there have to be a lot of company to company interactions to sign business contracts, which then turn into quote unquote dollar or euro values, right? So it doesn't happen overnight. While Europe has increased its defense production in recent years, its fragmented industry currently lacks the capacity of its US peers, which are financed by the world's largest military budget. Sure, but again, you're looking at a landmass which is much smaller than the US, and Europe is not currently, anyway, trying to do global projection of its power, right? So while US has capacity to produce, they also have to feed what I think 800 bases all across the world. Europe is just saying, don't mess with us. And
Hmm.
it's a smaller thing, right? Like what all of Western and Eastern Europe put together, maybe like it's basically the size of Texas and California put together. It's just a much smaller landmass.
Yeah.
So if you're trying to just protect that, it's you don't need all that crazy amounts of production unless you're trying to project yourself globally. Yes, there is a lot more bureaucratic headache in the EU, and they'll have to figure that out. Um, I don't understand the EU well enough to even have a say in, okay, what could be a possible solution around that. Especially now, how do you want to reintegrate UK back, since they are not necessarily an exact part of the EU anymore? Um, yeah, it's Europe is a classic case of, okay, too much. It's overly decentralized in that sense that there's just too many committees and not much getting done. That's the one place where US does have an edge from the rest of the world. In fact, like you look at India, like just like committee after committee after committee, and then something gets done, it's like 15 years have already gone. So US does
Yep.
have an edge there. The bureaucracy is way more streamlined. But yeah, JD, your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I like the go scroll down. There's like some icons that says like what Europe does more and faster than US. Yeah, this one. So this is interesting. So Europe makes more naval ships, submarines, vehicles, howitzers, right? Like this is like World War II stuff, right? What Europe also does: short range, air defense, drones, radars, small helicopters. So, all this is mostly defensive or like, can be put to other use like civilian, right? Like helicopters can be used in other things, right? But if you see, like, what is Europe mainly dependent on US and Israel for? Now you see, right? Stealth fighters, long range drones, long range air defense, gathering intelligence, right? So this is, I feel like, the 21st century of warfare, like stealth fighters and things like that. Case in point is the F-35, right? It's a fighter jet that is being bought by almost all EU countries, right? And the key things about F-35 is not the actual plane, but the software and the whole stack, the warfare stack behind it. It's like very high tech, and uh, it's crazy. Like you guys should see like a video for that. But what I'm trying to say here is, um, US is still innovating on all these new type of warfare products like drones and stealth fighters. US has an edge on intelligence, software, big data kind of gathering. So I think Europe should focus on that. If it needs to, actually do what it's saying, it needs to get into those industries and not just these World War II relic kind of things that are not even used anymore. Like if you have like 10 drones, like they can destroy a tank these days. So what good is a tank, and if the tank in turns goes and destroys these drones, it's okay because these drones are super cheap, right? So um another thing I want to mention here is that it's, even though US has a big budget, right? It has the Lockheed Martins and Boeings, right? It is still getting disrupted by smaller companies like Palantir or Andronil. These are new um, defense tech companies, right? They are coming in. So the tech and defense market in US is very fluid. Like new companies are coming in, the old companies are either buying them or doing what they're doing. So it's very competitive. That is something that Europe doesn't have. And yeah, the final point I want to say is, uh, like, I think Trump kind of indirectly fired up everybody to do something about it, right? Like all these European leaders were like, in this peaceful island, doing kumbaya, like everything is nice, right? And US and Trump comes along and they're like, no, I want security for my country, I want to upgrade my military, things like that. So now Europe has to think uh, for itself, and people forget, like, the like war is something that fortunately or unfortunately uh, helps a lot in building new technologies. So, a lot of stuff came out of World War II. A lot of new technologies were developed that we take for granted today. And to, develop new technologies, you need, like, war is unfortunate. Like, that is where, you develop new tricks and things like that against your enemies, and it's the best testing ground for new technologies. um, so yeah, those are my like 3 cents on the matter.
Yeah, I mean it. I find it interesting that Europe doesn't have stealth fighters. I mean France has Rafale, so I just did a quick search on Rafale. It's not classified as an exact stealth aircraft. It has some stealth capabilities. Europe has options, but again, you can't just overnight start building this kind of stuff: long range drones, long range missiles, long range air defense. But again, all of this long range stuff is needed if you want to attack someone, if you want to be on the offensive. Right now, Europe just wants to be like, stop messing with me. That's more of their that's their one sentence agenda, and for that I think they have a decent amount of capacity on what they want, on on that kind of a defensive strategy. I guess they have enough manufacturing capability. What they don't have is existing stuff like the number of soldiers, the total number of equipment. They just don't have enough of that. But let's, but I mean, I just want to put this in a very realistic perspective. There is always, oh, okay, that article is not showing up on the screen anymore. Let me pull up
Yeah,
the screen
I thought
share.
you took it away because you wanted to show our faces, but even they're small.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
now I see it.
So basically, I don't think, let's put it in perspective. There is not going to be a full scale war between Europe and US. It's not going to happen. For there is a lot of news that comes out, and there is a lot of social media that exaggerates the most little things that are said by all these world leaders. There will be a trade realignment, and that will be probably fairly long lasting. There will definitely be some sort of diversification on all countries and all alliances that exist, not just Europe. Everyone will diversify away from US equipment. Not that they will not buy anything, they will just hedge their bets. And that's why countries like India and China get to have more sort of a safety. They can feel more at peace just because either they produce their own, or when they buy from others, they buy in reasonable quantities. They don't rely on one military complex to supply everything for their defense, right? Let's Yeah, again, 2026 is just going to be a, you know it's just going to be something that'll keep giving for, I think, the rest of the year. Let me just bring us both back. I think, just, yeah, to conclude, I think 2026 is going to remain this way. It's going to remain fun. It's going to be a, yeah, it's just going to be a cow that'll keep giving, and we'll just keep informing you on that, having fun over here. But yeah, till then, like, share, and subscribe, everyone. JD, closing thoughts?
Yeah, excited for what's next. And the yeah, till we meet again, guys. Sorry if we had some technical difficulties today, but I think overall it went good. So see you guys next time. Ciao.
Yeah. So see you guys next week, episode 3 of Wasted Wanderers. Have a great rest of your Sunday. Bye bye.